your statement on Truth Social after the murder of Rob Reiner. Do you stand by that post?
Well, I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. He said he knew it was false. In fact, it's the exact opposite, that I was a friend of Russia, controlled by Russia. You know, it was the Russia hoax. He was one of the people behind it. I think he hurt himself in career-wise. He became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all, in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country.
This is the story of how President Donald Trump turned a family tragedy into a political firestorm that shocked even his own party. On December 14, 2025, legendary Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were found murdered in their Brentwood home. And within hours, their son Nick was arrested. What Trump did next left Republicans and Democrats equally stunned. We're going to walk through the timeline of this tragedy, examine Trump's controversial response, look at the bipartisan backlash that followed, and explore the heartbreaking history of addiction that preceded these murders. This isn't about picking political sides, it's about understanding a moment when even Trump's allies said he went too far. The director who changed Hollywood to understand why Trump's response caused such outrage, you need to know who Rob Reiner was. And I'm not talking about his politics, but rather his impact on American cinema. Born on March 6, 1947 in the Bronx, Rob came from comedy royalty as the son of Carl Reiner, the legendary comedian and 12-time Emmy winner. Growing up in that environment shaped him, but what he accomplished went far beyond living up to his father's legacy. Most people first knew him as Michael Meathead Stivic on All in the Family from 1971 to 1978, playing the liberal hippie opposite Carol O'Connor's conservative Archie Bunker, and winning 2 Emmy Awards in the process. Acting was just the beginning, though. His directorial debut came in 1984 with This Is Spinal Tap, which Roger Ebert called one of the funniest movies ever made. The film was the first mainstream mockumentary and essentially launched an entire genre, becoming so influential it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. But here's what makes Reiner's career truly remarkable. Between 1984 and 1992, he directed what many consider one of the greatest directing streaks in Hollywood history. Starting with This Is Spinal Tap in 1984, then Stand By Me in 1986, The Princess Bride in 1987, When Harry Met Sally in 1989, Misery in 1990, and finally A Few Good Men in 1992. The Princess Bride alone has become such a cultural touchstone that countless phrases from it entered regular conversation. Stand By Me earned Reiner an Academy Award nomination for Best Screenplay and a Golden Globe nomination for Best Director, while A Few Good Men was nominated for Best Picture, and gave us Jack Nicholson's iconic You Can't Handle the Truth scene, becoming Reiner's most commercially successful work. When Harry Met Sally is considered one of the greatest romantic comedies of all time, and helped define the modern rom-com. The film originally had an unhappy ending, which Reiner changed to a happy ending after meeting Michelle Singer on the set. And they got married in 1989 and stayed together for 36 years. Beyond directing, Reiner co-founded Castle Rock Entertainment in 1987, and the company produced City Slickers, The Shawshank Redemption, Waiting for Guffman, Miss Congeniality, Best in Show, and Michael Clayton. Castle Rock also produced a little show called Seinfeld, which became one of the most lucrative television properties of all time and reshaped expectations for network television comedy. CNN said Reiner changed movies forever by challenging himself as an artist, while the Associated Press called him the son of a comedy giant who became one himself as one of the preeminent filmmakers of his generation. At 78 years old, he had just released Spinal Tap 2, The End Continues in 2025, a sequel 41 years after the original. Michelle Singer Reiner was 68 or 70, depending on the source, a photographer and producer in her own right who shot photography for the Misery campaign featuring Kathy Bates. Like Rob, she was deeply involved in advocacy work, fighting for early childhood development, marriage equality, and LGBTQ+ rights. Together they had 3 children named Jake, Nick, and Romy, and Rob also had an adopted daughter Tracy from his previous marriage to director Penny Marshall, who passed away in 2018. The political divide. Rob Reiner's political activism can't be ignored in telling the story. As a prominent supporter of the Democratic Party and an extremely vocal critic of Donald Trump, Reiner didn't mince words when it came to his opinions. Reiner called Trump mentally unfit and described him as the single most unqualified human being to ever assume the presidency of the United States. In an October 2025 interview just 2 months before his death, Reiner said, "Our democracy is being taken away from us under the Trump administration." And in his last TMZ interview, he stated, "We've known for years the man's a crook and he's lawless. He's been that way even before he became president." Beyond criticizing Trump, Reiner was actively involved in progressive causes like advocating for universal preschool programs and helping launch California's First Five initiative for early childhood development. He fought against Proposition 8, which banned same-sex marriage, and worked to overturn it. Trump was well aware of Reiner's criticism, and as we'll see, he didn't forget about it. A family's private struggle behind the Hollywood success and political activism, the Reiner family was dealing with something intensely personal and painful, as their son Nick had been struggling with severe addiction since he was a teenager. Nick Reiner entered rehab for the first time at age 15, and by age 22, he had been through 17 rehab stays, 17 attempts at getting clean before his 22nd birthday. Heroin and cocaine addiction controlled Nick's life, along with prescription drugs that, in his words, messed with his head, and his addiction led to homelessness. Nick described his experiences in interviews saying, "I was homeless in Maine, I was homeless in New Jersey, I was homeless in Texas, I spent nights on the street." It was not fun. The impossible position his parents' ultimatums put him in became clear when he explained, "If I wanted to do it my way and not go to the programs they were suggesting, then I had to be homeless." He understood how close he came to death, saying, "When I was out there, I could have died. It's all luck. You roll the dice and you hope you make it." A 2018 podcast captured one particularly dark moment when Nick described, "I went 10 rounds in my guest house. I got totally spun out on uppers, I think it was coke and something else, and I was up for days on end. I started punching out some things in my guest house." Nick lived in a guest house on his parents' Brentwood property, separate from the main structure, as the family owned 2 houses across the street from each other. Rob and Michelle tried everything. A friend reported that Michelle said a few years ago, "We've tried everything. We don't know what else to do." While Rob himself said in 2016, "I'd rather you hate me than you be dead in the street." Out of this struggle came a film when Nick co-wrote the screenplay for Being Charlie with Matt Elisafon, whom he met in rehab. They started writing it longhand at a treatment center because they couldn't spend much time on computers, and Rob directed the film, which was released in 2015 or 2016, depending on the source.
He was subsequently booked for murder and is being held on $4 million bail.
Politician father and his drug-addicted son. The film received negative reviews with a 24% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but it was deeply personal for the family and their attempt to make meaning out of suffering. Some sources reported Nick had been looking healthier recently, with cinematographer Barry Markowitz saying Nick looked like a GQ model just 10 days before the murders, and noting his soul was so pure and gentle. Markowitz also described family dinners where the Reiner children regularly ate with their parents, watching basketball or news and often yelling at the TV at the same time. Other sources paint a different picture, though. TMZ reported that Nick was not mentally sound in the period of time leading up to the murders. And these conflicting accounts show how difficult it can be to assess someone's true state when they're struggling with addiction and mental health issues. The night everything changed. Saturday night on December 13th, 2025, Nick Reiner attended Conan O'Brien's Christmas party at his Los Angeles home, where his parents Rob and Michelle were also present. Reports indicate Nick got into a heated argument with his father at the party, and attendees said Nick was acting very odd and seemed high. He wore a sweatshirt to the ritzy event, which struck people as out of place, and he kept to himself during the party. What happened after that party would destroy a family and shock the nation. In the early morning hours of December 14th on Sunday, Rob and Michelle Reiner were murdered in their Brentwood home, where both had their throats slit. Fatal stabbings with a knife caused their deaths, according to Los Angeles County District Attorney Nathan J. Hochman. Around 4 in the morning, Surveillance video captured Nick Reiner walking on the Santa Monica Pier, heading toward the Pierside Santa Monica Hotel while wearing a black backpack and a hat. At 4:15 a.m., just 6 minutes after the surveillance footage, Nick checked into the hotel, and sources said no blood was visible on him when he arrived. Around 3:40 p.m. that Sunday afternoon, the bodies were discovered when the Los Angeles Fire Department responded to a medical aid request. Rob and Michelle Reiner were found dead in their Brentwood home, and it was their daughter Romy who discovered her parents' bodies. At approximately 8:20 p.m. Sunday evening, Nick was spotted at an Arco gas station near the University of Southern California, about 15 miles from the family home. He was wearing jeans, a striped jacket, and a baseball cap. But here's a detail that investigators certainly noted. He was now carrying a red backpack after switching from the black backpack seen in the earlier surveillance footage. Video from the gas station shows him swaying and pacing slightly as he entered the gas station and purchased a drink. At 9:15 p.m. on Sunday, December 14th, Nick Reiner was arrested in Exposition Park near the USC campus by LAPD and the U.S. Marshals Service, booked on suspicion of murder early Monday morning, and held without bail. Barack and Michelle Obama released a statement revealing they were supposed to have dinner with the Reiners on Sunday evening, the night they were found dead. Celebrity friends Billy Crystal and Larry David were reportedly seen at the house after police arrived. Trump's shocking response. Monday morning on December 15th, 2025, less than 24 hours after the bodies were discovered, President Donald Trump posted a statement on Truth Social that read, word for word. A very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood. Rob Reiner, a tortured and struggling, but once very talented movie director and comedy star, has passed away, together with his wife Michelle, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding, and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome, sometimes referred to as TDS. He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness, and with the golden age of America upon us, perhaps like never before. May Rob and Michelle rest in peace. Trump was baselessly suggesting that Rob Reiner's death and his wife's death was caused by the anger he caused others through being anti-Trump. No evidence whatsoever supports this claim, as the murders occurred at the hands of their son, who was struggling with severe addiction and mental health issues. Trump's post immediately sparked outrage, but he didn't walk it back. Later that same Monday afternoon, reporters asked him in the Oval Office if he stood by his post. Trump responded with, "Well, I wasn't a fan of his at all. He was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned. He became like a deranged person, Trump derangement syndrome. So I was not a fan of Rob Reiner at all in any way, shape, or form. I thought he was very bad for our country. The Russia hoax, he was one of the people behind it. I think he hurt himself career-wise." Trump doubled down in the Oval Office on the record while Rob and Michelle Reiner's children were trying to process the murder of their parents. When Republicans break ranks, what happened next was remarkable as Republicans, including staunch Trump allies, publicly criticized the president. This doesn't happen often, which is why it's so significant. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a former Trump ally, said, "This is a family tragedy, not about politics or political enemies." Rob Reiner and his wife were tragically killed at the hands of their own son, who reportedly had drug addiction and other issues, and their remaining children are left in serious mourning and heartbreak. Representative Thomas Massey of Kentucky said, "Regardless of how you felt about Rob Reiner, this is inappropriate and disrespectful discourse about a man who was just brutally murdered." And added, "I guess my elected GOP colleagues, the VP and White House staff, will just ignore it because they're afraid? I challenge anyone to defend it." Representative Don Bacon of Nebraska put it bluntly, "I'd expect to hear something like this from a drunk guy at a bar, not the President of the United States." Representative Mike Lawler of New York simply called Trump's statement wrong. Jenna Ellis, a former Trump campaign lawyer, said, "A man and his wife were murdered last night. This is not the appropriate response." The right uniformly condemned political and celebratory responses to Charlie Kirk's death. This is a horrible example from Trump, and she called it indefensible by anybody. David Urban, a former senior advisor on Trump's 2016 campaign, called Trump's remarks indefensible and said it could hurt Republicans in midterms. He stated, "The president does lots of good things, but yet these kind of posts, these kind of actions by the president detract from all of that." This wasn't just a few isolated voices, but rather a broad chorus of Republicans saying on the record that the president had crossed a line. Democratic reactions were more predictable, but no less heartfelt. Barack and Michelle Obama paid tribute, noting their planned dinner. Former President Bill and Hillary Clinton called the Reiners good, generous people. California Governor Gavin Newsom said he was heartbroken by the tragic loss. LA Mayor Karen Bass called it a devastating loss for our city and our country. And Vice President Kamala Harris praised Reiner's work and commitment to democracy. The most telling indicator of public sentiment came from a YouGov poll showing 72% of Americans said Trump's post was inappropriate, while only 17% said it was appropriate. That's not a partisan split, but a national consensus. Not everyone criticized Trump, of course. Alex Brusewitz, a Trump ally, defended him by saying, "Rob Reiner was really nasty towards the president. He said many hateful things. It's okay for people to have different reactions." And some MAGA figures initially expressed sympathy, but later defended Trump's right to respond. The legal proceedings. While the political firestorm raged, Nick Reiner faced the criminal justice system. On December 16, 2025, he was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, with a special circumstance allegation of multiple murders and a special allegation for use of a dangerous and deadly weapon, specifically a knife. The potential penalties are severe. Life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty, though the LA County District Attorney has not yet decided whether to seek the death penalty. Nick retained Alan Jackson as his attorney, a high-profile criminal defense lawyer who has previously represented Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacey, and Karen Red. Wednesday, December 17, 2025 brought Nick's court appearance, where reports described him as quiet and calm. He sat behind glass behind his attorney and spoke briefly when addressed by Jackson or the judge. Nick waived his right to a speedy arraignment, which pushed his arraignment to January 7, 2026. And after court, Alan Jackson said, "Our hearts go out to the entire Reiner family." Nick is currently held on $4 million bond, though he's effectively being held without bail. The investigation by LAPD continues as the medical examiner will determine the exact time of death, and police search Nick's hotel room for evidence. The children left behind. Jake and Romy Reiner released a statement that captures the incomprehensible pain of this tragedy. Words cannot even begin to describe the unimaginable pain we are experiencing every moment of the day. They weren't just our parents, they were our best friends. They asked for respect and privacy, for speculation to be tempered with compassion and humanity. Their situation is unimaginable. They lost both parents in a brutal murder, their brother is accused of killing them, and the President of the United States politicized their tragedy within hours by suggesting their parents' political views somehow caused their deaths. Then he doubled down when questioned about it. This is what makes Trump's response so shocking to so many people, even to those who support him on policy issues. Certain lines once crossed can't be uncrossed, and there are moments when politics should take a backseat to basic human decency. What this reveals. This story reveals several uncomfortable truths. First off, it shows the devastating impact of addiction, not just on the person struggling, but on entire families. 17 rehab stays before age 22. Years of trying everything. A family that stayed together and kept trying and made a movie about their struggle in hopes of helping others. And it still ended in unimaginable tragedy. Second, it demonstrates the depth of political polarization in America. Rob Reiner was so outspoken in his criticism of Trump that the president couldn't set aside their political differences even in the immediate aftermath of a brutal murder, as Trump's statement essentially suggested that being anti-Trump could drive people to violence, a baseless claim that ignores the actual circumstances of the case. Third, it shows that there are still limits to what even partisan allies will defend. When Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie publicly break with Trump over his comments, It indicates those comments crossed a line that goes beyond normal political discourse. Fourth, it highlights how public figures, whether politicians or directors, are still human beings with private struggles. Rob Reiner changed American cinema and created films that millions love, built businesses that employed thousands, and advocated for causes he believed in. But he was also a father desperately trying to help his son overcome addiction. Both things can be true simultaneously. Conclusion: as of December 19, 2025, Nick Reiner awaits his January 7th arraignment while the investigation continues, and Trump has not retracted or apologized for his statements, facing ongoing criticism from both parties. The title of this video mentioned a shocking decision, and Trump's decision to politicize this tragedy and then double down on that decision when questioned is exactly that. It's a decision that prompted bipartisan condemnation, a decision that 72% of Americans disagreed with, and a decision that turned a family's worst nightmare into a national controversy. Beyond the politics, beyond the controversy, beyond the social media firestorm, there's a simpler truth. 2 people were murdered, 3 children lost their parents and their brother, and a son who struggled with addiction for 17 years is now charged with killing his parents. No political point, no matter how important it seems in the moment, is worth forgetting that fundamental human tragedy. Rob Reiner made movies that made us laugh, made us cry, made us fall in love, and made us believe in friendship. Michelle Reiner fought for causes that helped children and families. They deserved better than to have their deaths turned into a political weapon, and their children deserved better than to process their grief in the middle of a national controversy. That's the real story here. Not the politics or the tweets, but the people. Thank you for watching. If this video gave you insight into this complicated situation, please like and subscribe, and maybe take a moment today to check in on someone you know who's struggling with addiction, or to remind your family members that you love them, because ultimately that's what matters most. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.